Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we will dive into a very exciting topic, Unlock Your Organization's Potential, How Mentoring Solves the Top 5 Workforce Challenges. This session is eligible for HRCI, SHRM, and ATD professional development credits. For those of you who aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we are a leading research and analyst firm with a global reach of over 10,000 clients and over 30 years of experience. We provide research-based solutions that drive organizational excellence through innovative tools and insights. Our vision is to inspire a better workplace experience, and our mission is to empower excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools each and every day. Here is a sample of our clients. Our impact extends to over 10 million employees and executives through our comprehensive research library, strategic insights, and prestigious awards program. We also invite you, as always, to participate in our research surveys. Links will be available in your handout, or you can always visit brandonhall.com. Once the results are analyzed, all participants receive a piece of complimentary research and other exclusive benefits. If you want to learn more about our Excellence Awards program, please visit excellenceawards.brandonhall.com. Brandon Hall Group Institute is the top research and insights institute serving learning, talent, and HR leaders worldwide. For over 3 decades, we've shaped the future of human capital management by providing essential research, certification, and recognition to organizations committed to excellence. Thank you to today's webinar sponsor, NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd transforms learning through an integrated solution for creating, facilitating, and delivering high-impact learning experiences. Global organizations trust NovoEd to enable experiences that go beyond content and knowledge checks, integrating peer learning, feedback, practice, and application. NovoEd works with all content sources and supports all types of formal learning, including self-paced, hybrid, blended, cohort-based, one-to-one, and team-based learning. To learn more about why companies like 3M, Marriott, and Nestle use NovoEd to go beyond content and knowledge checks to drive performance readiness at scale, visit novoed.com to learn more. Now, let's meet today's speakers. First up, we have Todd Moran, the Chief Learning Strategist at NovoEd. We have Lisa Fain, the CEO of Center for Mentoring Excellence, and Alan Mellish, Principal Analyst at Brandon Hall Group. I'm excited to share that today's webinar, we will be selecting a raffle winner. You could be a winner of a free Excellence in Action program submission. Stay tuned to see if you're the lucky winner. You must be present to win. Now, just a few quick things to note. If you have any questions, please use the questions panel on your control bar. We will answer questions throughout the webinar and at the end. We're recording this webinar and we'll email you the link and a PDF of the slides within 24 hours. The chat box is open, so feel free to share your thoughts as we go along. Your input makes this more valuable for everyone. Now I would like to pass things off to Alan.
Thanks, Ivy. And today's agenda, welcome everybody here on the line today. We're going to be covering a lot of ground, but and especially with focusing on mentoring and how it can bring your talent management challenges a little bit closer to the finish line. But first, we're going to talk about our talent priorities for this coming year, what we're seeing in the research, and we also want to hear from you, the audience. So expect a couple of polls here. Then we're going to talk about how there's a growing focus on mentoring as a way to address some of these priorities, and then we'll get into our discussion about how mentoring works, what it is, what it isn't, what are the elements of a successful mentoring program, and then talk about some exciting ways that people are starting to think about expanding the reach of mentoring beyond what's been traditionally possible. And then, of course, time for your Q&A, as Ivy mentioned. So if we can get started here, we will move to the first slide, which is a poll question. We want to know, what are your top talent management priorities in priorities for talent management in 2025? Select all that apply so that we can get a good sense here. And I'm curious to see how this compares to what we've seen in our research. But Lisa, what are you expecting to see from this poll, or what would you guess that the audience is going to respond with?
Yeah, I think engagement and retention is huge right now. And then of course, team and personal and professional management, career development.
Yep.
That would be my guess.
What about you, Todd?
Yeah, I'd be intrigued with the sample set compared to the original, but we see this idea of ever closer expectation of talent strategy mapping to business goals and watching that elevate. So I'd be surprised if that wasn't in the top 5 of response set here.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've seen across a variety of the HR human capital focused functions. I know in other reports we've seen that rank very high for talent acquisition folks and more core traditional HR. So I think we've probably got at least enough responses to take a look at the results here. And so employee experience, engagement and retention, that is coming in strong at number 1, closely followed by competency and skill gaps and improving alignment between talent strategy and business goals. So, our top 3 right there are kind of where we were all thinking. What's your guys' reaction there?
Yeah, seems right on.
Yeah, I was a little interested to see the sort of the gap component for those top 3 being, a fairly sizable, from catching that right, of the, above 50, and then the sort of gap down to sort of 27%. So maybe a clear line of demarcation for folks where, at the end of the day, it's about focus, right? For talent learning organizations, and where are they making their big bets? Because you can't do it all, and we're already two nearly 3 months into the year, so.
Yeah. Oh, and I should also mention, I guess it's not completely rank ordered. Empower and enable employees to own their career development is a big part of it here too. That showed up as being a tie for first, actually. So that is great, because that dovetails kind of nicely with a lot of what we're going to be talking about later in the webinar. So we'll move on to, and guys, this is data from our most recent study, and it's almost perfectly mirrors the question you saw, although we consolidated a few just to obey the restrictions of Zoom. But you can see here that it maps pretty well to what we just saw with those top 3 there. And then also you'll notice that owning career development, a little bit more the middle of the pack for the people that were surveyed in the study, but still, I would say this audience lines up pretty well with what we saw in the research here. Lisa, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, there's a Venn diagram of all of these things and how they overlap with one another, but seems to be spot on.
Yeah, I feel like, should we give them spoiler alert that, guess what, mentoring can help solve for many of these. So that's part of what's coming here. But
it is the beauty of mentoring, right? It's the sense of, how do we have this rising tide that elevates all, including, of course, engagement and retention and helping teams perform better and creating a sense of agency and ownership among employees. So I'm excited to share more as we go forward.
Yeah. Absolutely. So if we can keep moving on in our progression here, I wanted to cover some of this data, which I think is really interesting, that's focused on the development of future leaders and or its priorities in leadership development from the same study, the HR Outlook study for 2025, and improving high potential development and succession planning comes in first here. And so I think obviously that's another area where traditionally mentoring has been a big part, or coaching, or some version of that one-to-one relationship where somebody's helping you navigate your career growth and transition. But Lisa, anything jump out to you here about the data we're seeing?
No, I mean, just to kind of piggyback though on what you were saying, Alan, is the beauty of mentoring is it's not just the development of future leaders, it's also the identification of future leaders. So it
Sure.
really does help plug in with these top priorities in a really holistic way.
Yeah, and I think the other piece I'd add on that, Lisa, is this idea that, obviously we have a point of view on it in NovoEd, but when you think about the compilation of learning and mentoring, helping to solve for arguably definitely the top four that are sort of in this list, there's sort of a red thread to be pulled through on both of those things being powerful levers for folks to activate when they're thinking about, not just leadership development and its focus, which is the basis of this rendering, but sort of the broader talent strategy and workforce development strategy. So I know we'll get into some of that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So if we look at the next slide here, I think that we're kind of, there's a growing focus. I think the research is showing on mentoring as a tool to achieve some of this. So if we can jump to the next slide, we can see a little bit what we're talking about. So this is just a look from, this is also pretty recent data. This is from a study we did last year, methods used for developing for leadership skills and training and practice. And there's a variety of, everybody's taking a good blended approach, it looks like, but we're obviously calling out having an assigned coach or mentor to drive specific development is in the middle of the pack here. But then we've also got informal coaching and mentoring as well. And, I guess this is an opportunity, Lisa, to, coaching and mentoring are terms that often get combined, partially because, when we're designing surveys, it's really, really hard to get everything down to the granular level that we always want, but also sometimes in people's minds it's just lumped together as this sort of blob of development practices. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Alan. So it's actually the most common question that I get, because I do think that mentoring is the most promiscuously used word in leadership development, in that it's often misused. The truth is that coaching and mentoring are sisters. I like to say that all good mentors are coaches, but not all good coaches are mentors. So here's what we know about coaching. Coaching is a skill that mentors can use. Coaching is well, let me back up and say that there's three characteristics of a mentoring relationship. There's learning, and we know that both coaching and mentoring are learning relationships. There's reciprocity in mentoring, which means that mentors give and mentors get, mentees give and mentees get. And that's often missing in the coaching relationship because it is just for the benefit of the coachee or the client. And then there's this idea of co-creation, of co-creating the relationship, which is something also that's more typically prevalent in a mentoring relationship and not in a coaching relationship, where the mentor and the mentee together create the relationship. They are both really important. It's definitely an and not an or. And there are skills to be developed in both realms. But truly, a learning culture, a culture that's focused on development, has to have some of the coaching and it has to have some of the mentoring. And both of those are skills development opportunities.
Yeah, and I see, at least it's interesting. One of the things that you make me think about is at what point in time, and we'd love to hear people maybe weigh in on chat if they're deploying mentoring right now. We're going to get into some of the prototypical manifestations. What does it look like? Where does it take shape in large enterprises? But it becomes this wonderful reinforcing aspect to skill development. And I know that was one of the top in the preceding, I think, two stats there, Alan. You highlighted that as we're not getting off the skills train, but if it's solving the skills train by just sort of expressing content to people or putting them through programmatic learning alone, that's probably not going to get it done. And so can it be this sort of wonderful lever in a talent development strategy for reinforcing components through these one-to-one relationships over a period of time? Yes, informal is great, but maybe putting a bit more structure and rigor around it has even higher reward for folks and higher return for organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. So if we move to the next slide here, we'll keep going. And I love calling out this. 65% of organizations believe that coaching and mentoring is a crucial competency for leadership development teams. So we're trying to, those of you who might be in leadership development are trying to eat some of your own dog food, it sounds like, which we commend you for, of course. And I think that is, so I guess the real point here is that we are using what we have. We're recognizing that mentoring and coaching and the overlap of skills that Lisa beautifully outlined there for us is gaining recognition. It is a big part. We recognize in our own industry, it's a big part of how we're going to get to get to our goals in terms of development for the organizations we support.
I wonder if the aperture could be even wider too. Lisa, I'd love your take on this. I know, Alan, the explicit survey instrument was against leadership dev teams, but is mentoring just for them, or could it be for sort of broader populations? If the goal is skill development, the goal is retention, the goal is talent development, why just isolate it maybe against the leadership dev team? Can we help people open aperture and think maybe more broadly there?
Yeah, for sure. It's something we want to be thinking about more broadly. And for a leadership development teams, it's interesting because I think about the principles of adult learning, right? Too often, I think historically in our leadership development teams, it's just been about knowledge transfer. And that's not really how adults learn. And if we're really trying to develop the next group of leaders, to Todd's point, certainly our leadership development teams have to have these skills of coaching and mentoring to be able to help impart the learning. And let's think about it as a crucial leadership competency overall, that all great leaders need to have the competency of mentoring. All great leaders need to have coaching skills to help draw that out in their people. So the potential for it's really quite huge.
Yeah, and there may be a parallel there, Alan. I think I can remember some of the wonderful studies you've done last year about with a fellow analyst Claude Werner and the democratization of leadership. Can that be not just for the select few, but for the many? And I wonder if we're going to start to see an arc here, and would love folks' commentary if they're saying, the potential application of mentoring coaching broader across their own organizations, or no, we're just going to isolate to a fixed population. That's really our focal point. I think there's massive possibility there in opening it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's sort of there's definitely a trend that we've been seeing. And I'll let Claude know that you name checked him, that you name dropped him later on. But absolutely, there is a big trend both in people seeing the potential of some of the technological advances that we've all been experiencing and grappling with over the last couple of years, where we're realizing the capacity of AI and other related tools to act as a force multiplier or scale some of these experiences up, so that it doesn't have to be that way. Although I would also maybe challenge some of our audience members that I think the great thing about mentoring, in my mind, is that, while yes, it's maybe traditionally been applied to only certain select groups in your organization, that doesn't have to, in the same way that every manager can act as a pseudo coach, at least, and apply coaching skills. There is opportunities for more experienced individual contributors to act as mentors to folks who are newer in seat. And it doesn't have to, don't think of technology as being the only limiter on your ability to create a more coaching or mentoring focused organization, just in the same way that having a culture of learning in general is not limited by your access to technology, but it's also a mindset shift. I guess I'm saying, like, you could have the best technology in the world, and if nobody's thinking about it, that's a problem. And Ivy did thank you for highlighting this. We got from a question from the audience that I did want to get to, especially because the questioner is from Nepal, so they are probably up either very early or late, depending on how I do my time zone math. So I want to recognize your commitment to to getting those HRCI credits. So anyways, Banu, I hope I'm saying your name right. Is mentoring just a nice thing that's being talked about in your organizations, or has the business world realized this is an intervention in optimizing organizational effectiveness?
I can take that. Hi, Banu. Nice to see your name. I think we've really gotten to a point where I am no longer having to present, quote unquote, the business case for mentoring. I hope I get the statistic right, but it's something like 72% of CEOs recognize that mentoring is a important factor in leadership development. So the question is often how and what resources are they going to dedicate to it versus whether. So we've gone from a place, 10 years ago where there was a lot of convincing to do that mentoring was an organizational imperative, to recognizing that mentoring is an organizational imperative, but questioning how are we going to implement this, and how are we going to do it at scale, and how are we going to optimize it. But it's actually very, very heartening to see where organizations have gone. Todd, has your experience been any different?
No, it's really similar. And I think we watch the parallels of what are mature learning organizations that would sort of count themselves in that category, recognizing that part of that broader strategy of learning and talent marrying together and thinking holistically needs to include other things other than just learning. And so we too are seeing appetite and eagerness from, both our clientele and the entire sort of market we serve at the top end of enterprise, saying, we know we need to do this, but help us with the mechanics and the how and the scalability. And I know we'll get into some of those components later about core elements of what makes a great program and how it can show up. But without question, I think some of the most sort of mature and aspiring organizations recognize this becomes not just a nice to have, but far more of a critical must have.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to piggyback on that before we move along, I think that it makes logical sense when you think about it, right? If it's a organization that is already oriented towards learning, most of the business leaders who are going to be stakeholders in, supporting and executing these kinds of programs, a lot of them, if you ask them to look back on their own background, would have to say, like, okay, I didn't get to be CFO just by working in isolation and figuring out how to like drive myself to that position. Like, there was at least a couple of informal mentors and along the way, even if they didn't go through even if it wasn't a formalized program, they recognized the value of those kinds of relationships that can have on growing your career and taking yourself to the next level. So I think the nice thing about making the case for mentoring is that increasingly more leaders have had that own life experience to be able to say, yeah, I could see how a mentoring program would really help. But as you say, Lisa, it's like, okay, I get it, I want to do it, but you got to show me how, and how are we going to make it happen in an efficient way. So let's move on and keep things rolling here. This is another slide, or another stat here that I wanted to highlight, where you can see mentoring and coaching broken out. Coaching a little bit higher up there in terms of that, but I think that you can see that this is really just reinforcing the theme here that mentoring is, definitely an established and growing part of leadership development. But I think that we're as we're getting to, we're going to find that there's opportunities to expand that reach of mentoring beyond there. Lisa, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I'm smiling because there's you have mentoring as the category here, which is just mentoring. But the truth is that what we know about mentoring is that what it took to get a good leader, to become a good leader, doesn't necessarily mean that you become a good mentor. And so there actually is such an overlap here. the organizations that are doing the best in mentoring are raising the capacity, the capability of their leaders to be good mentors. So it comes through things like e-learning. It comes through things like coaching. Certainly even here, stretch assignments, action learning, rotational programs, there's a mentoring component of that as well. It's the formal and the informal. It's the structured learning and the unstructured learning. It's the micro mentoring moments and the mentoring relationships that really pervades all of this. So, as somebody who sees all things through a lens of mentoring, I'm really seeing all of these responses through a lens of mentoring as well.
At least I'm smiling too, but for a different reason. I was thinking for a second, what if you just hid a single word in the header of that and hid leadership? And it just read, what methods does your organization use for skills training? You could make it a very plausible argument that each and every one of these would still have deep application. If that's technical training, if that's soft skills training, not explicit to the nature of leadership, if it's client facing or customer facing entities in a frontline setting, and so that's part of, I think, carrying torch for the power of all of these, not just the sort of the pieces that we operate at NovoEd with, obviously, cohort and at a high level, and soon to be some exciting notes on mentoring, but think of them in compilation, but solving for universal skills and reskilling development, I think would be prudent for folks to think about.
Yeah, I love that, Todd. They say, as a parent, you're not raising children, you're raising adults. I think leadership is professional. You're not raising employee, you're raising leaders. Same kind of thing, right? You can think about it through that same lens as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ivy, shall we move on here? So, and then this is more forward-looking data. And, what makes us happy about this is, everybody's seeing when leaders need, like you said, Lisa, leaders need support in being that mentor or coach to employees. And so, that's number one here. That's like the most popular response to this question is how you're going, like what changes are you making to your leadership development approach? And it means more mentorship skills. And then I think also, I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, but to look at this all through the lens of mentoring, I can see, better succession planning that's enabled by mentoring. Assessing leadership readiness is something that can be supported by mentoring by, saying like, hey, employee A over here, let's get feedback from their mentor on, on what they think their what they think their gaps are. Let's get that qualitative information rather than just raw performance score data on where their capacity or future capacity lies. So I think there's a lot of ways that mentorship can, while being the top of the list here, it's also a way to improve, or a way to achieve some of the other goals that are outlined below.
Yeah, 100%. Again, the best mentoring programs, it's not mentoring qua mentoring for mentoring. It's mentoring for the sake of alignment with whatever your talent strategy is and whatever your organizational strategy is. And so, the beauty of it is that it is a gateway to all of the other things that you're trying to achieve. Whenever I'm working with an organization on, developing a mentoring initiative, the first question is, why do you want a mentoring initiative? Right? We know all the things that a mentoring initiative can accomplish, but to what end? What are the strategic priorities? And when you think about focusing on how leaders can better coach and mentor employees, and you think about aligning with the talent strategy and the leadership development strategy, you can start to think about how can this be a vehicle for getting the organization where it wants to go from a talent perspective and from a business outcome perspective as well.
It makes me think a little bit about, Lisa, I could still remember, just to harken back to that skills sort of mention, that sort of that WEF study back from 2020 that predicted what would be the top 10 skills in demand across workforce universally by 2025. They since updated that, but arguably sort of there was a meta skill in there, and that was sort of the ability to learn. And so I think of in many ways, you're making the analogous nature of what mentoring can be for the sort of broader enabler of all the things, all the business imperatives that an organization wants to do. It can't necessarily be a silver bullet. It can't exist on its own by any stretch of the imagination. But as both entry, Alan, to your point, in the response set and enabler of the others, I think is a phenomenal way for folks to be thinking about this.
Yeah, and another great question from the audience here. Joyce Wong asks, one of the common themes I've noticed is that though the intention is there, many leaders struggle with the process of mentoring. Most of the reasons could be due to workload or not having the know-how or experience. What is your advice on this?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is due to, I think the answer is option C. I think both workload and the how-to, which is why it has to be articulated as part of your strategy, your organization's priorities. Your leaders have to be talking about why and how mentoring is important. It has to be rewarded and acknowledged, and there has to be that capacity building. The other piece, I think, so often mentors say, I want to give back, and that's fantastic and a terrific thing. But the truth is, until mentoring is acknowledged, the reciprocity of mentoring is acknowledged, that the benefit for mentors is more than just that great feeling of giving back, right? Not that giving back isn't an important thing, but it actually is a strategy for developing the mentor as well as developing the mentee. Workload will always, until that's recognized, workload will always trump what is important but not urgent. And so that recognition as an organization can really be transformational in terms of how the organization views mentoring.
Excellent. Todd, anything you want to add there?
No, I think that the piece that I'll just sort of bring it back around to, is, at the end of the day, like, what are the business objectives you're going after? And if truly this idea of, well, we can't create capacity, can't carve time because you don't believe that mentoring can solve for those things, you're probably reading the room wrong. And I think that's what a lot of this data has come out as of late, Alan, that you're showcasing is it can be this sort of instrumental tool with which to sort of navigate an organization through its core business challenges. And there are many. There are many for this year and beyond. So,
yeah, absolutely. And another thing that just kind of occurred to me as we were fleshing all that out is that I've been involved in research for a while into a lot of these different and complementary areas. And if you think about sort of the role of middle managers and frontline managers, a lot of what ideally they should be doing is acting as kind of a transfer gear for the strategic objectives of the business. And of course, that's hard for all the reasons that we all know. Like it's hard to make time for it. It's hard to sometimes it's hard to articulate it or make it relevant for the people that you manage. And I think a well-designed mentoring program can both augment the skills of those middle and frontline managers to do that better, and talk, use mentoring skills on their employees, even if it's not a official mentoring relationship, but then also creating a cadre of folks who are in alignment with that strategic direction and are set up to support management in this way of saying, like, okay, we know we need to go. We know the overall direction of this department, this division is this. Let's talk about how your individual development aligns with that, or whatever it is. So I rambled for a second. Would either of you like to reflect on that?
Just I'll do a thumbs up, agree. I'm kind of emoji.
Exactly. We had emojis. Yeah, maybe Zoom webinar is not fully in. I'll do sort of raising hands of violent agreement.
Yeah, I need like the Instagram like hearts like
That's right.
cascading
That's
everywhere. Or whatever. Anyways, so let's move on to the next piece here, and this is really kind of from a different part of the same study that we were just looking at. And again, it's reinforcing this point that organizations believe that more opportunities for leaders to learn this skill or this skill set are needed, because there's some recognition in the marketplace that this is just like too important to fall down on the job here. This is like becoming a core competency of leadership at all levels, is to, once you figured out how to do your job, you got to, your job becomes at least partially becoming a mentor to others.
Yeah, what strikes me, Alan, out of this stat too, is this idea of sort of the ongoing. If I sort of index on that particular word, we see this, it's parallel for universal skill development on the learning side. Is let's get away from models of past that were very episodic at best. They were singular interventions, and then you expected employees just to then perform at a wholly different level in output, and that's not the case. And I think there's this sort of same perspective here, with sort of leaders. We need to move to more of this continuous development motion, and something like mentoring, with its sort of one-to-one at core, provides for that. The sort of the reinforcing, the continuation, the sort of systematic approach to that. I think is powerful.
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is what's happening generationally in our workforce, and that I don't remember any of the numbers, but what I do know is that a large percentage of the workforce is aging out, and a larger percentage of the workforce rising up, and the expectations with respect to mentoring and the need for mentoring are only increasing. The need for mentoring because we have hybrid workforces, and we have global organizations in a way that we hadn't before. We have an epidemic of loneliness and isolation that's affecting the well-being of employees. All of these things that are requiring mentoring and a sense of connectedness in a way that in our workplaces that hasn't been, ever in any of our lifetimes yet. And so, more opportunities for that, creating more of a sense of agency and ownership, and for employees, is really spot on with this this statistic in particular.
Thank you. And let's move on. And just a note to attendee Andrew Bateman. First of all, hi, Andrew. And we actually have a segment that we're going to get to in a few minutes that will perfectly tee up your question. So I'm going to reserve it for then. But for right now, we have another poll question. How do you see mentoring programs benefiting your organization currently or in the future? You can select, it's another select all that apply. And so what I'm really curious to see is, I want to see how faster employee skill development and knowledge transfer shows up here. I'm expecting retention and engagement to be relatively strong, as well as leadership development. But I think that I'm really curious to see what people think or see right now, or are hoping to see, regarding skill development and knowledge transfer in the future. So I hope I haven't sullied the pool and everybody's going to try and either like resist my prompting or follow what I've just told them to do. But that's all I got to say on that. Lisa? Oh, Todd, go ahead.
No, I just I'll be intrigued about it, and I won't try to put thumb on scale. We'll let people do this in a truly democratic way. I won't even pull that thread further at this moment in time, although I could. But this idea of enhanced onboarding, we're watching this manifest across a lot of our install base to say, how can we, to Lisa, to your point, how do we create these greater opportunities, whether it's cross-generational or just within our workforce, for the talent that we've finally gotten in the door? How do we make them feel, wholly surrounded, supported, successful, and let's make them performant and roll at a faster pace? And so I'll be intrigued to see if that one surfaces.
Oh, for sure.
Excellent. So we just closed the poll and we're sharing the results now. And so it looks like, here we go. Number one that I can see is improved retention and engagement, followed by better career development outcomes for employees at 71%. So I'm not surprised there. And then faster employee skill development and knowledge transfer comes in at third place, possibly because one of the panelists juked the stats there. But and enhanced onboarding and new hire success is closely following at fourth place. So Lisa, what is your reaction here?
Yeah, the interrelationship between retention and engagement and onboarding and new hire success is really notable to me. Again, don't quote me on the exact number, but it's certainly over 70% show like the top factor in somebody feeling satisfied at work is whether they have somebody at work who cares about their success.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
Getting in that, you probably have better data on that, Alan, than I do. But getting in early when somebody's there to have that sense of belonging helps them feel much more invested in figuring out what they need to learn, identifying what those gaps are, and closing those gaps.
And that almost,
Absolutely.
Lisa, that almost feels a little bit of the origin state triangle from First Break All the Rules, right? Is this sort of defining characteristic of what gets people to stick around and feel sort of endeared to organization, which I think in a massive compete for talent that is universal now, kind of cross industry, is going to be even more important for organizations.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing to keep in mind for everybody who's who everybody cares about. Anybody in the audience who cares about the broader talent management strategy that we're kind of looking at here is the outcome you're really trying to get, as Todd was getting at there, is you're trying to get the best and keep the best and make the best even better as far as your talent strategy goes, right? And so it's really I can't stress how important it is to take advantage in the early stages of this is the point where the person is most open to being wooed or they're most engaged is probably going to be their first or second day on the job. And so getting that person connected and embedded into the organization, feeling supported from day one, think of it like we all need to be thinking about this the way that like high-end hospitality organizations think about it. Like the minute you walk into a Ritz-Carlton or something like that, there's somebody practically escorting you, from every step you take into the hotel. And so that's kind of, you need that at a time when people are excited, but also probably confused and uncertain about where everything is, giving them that any extra support, the kind of support that a mentor relationship can provide in those early stages is huge, I think. Okay, great. So I want to keep an eye on time, but we've had a great discussion so far. But let's keep moving here so that we can cover this. We've already covered this a bit, just haphazardly in the course of our discussion, but I really want to give this to Lisa to start things off. Is how does the mentoring relationship work? How are we kind of defining that so that everybody, how does this even work? How do organizations do this?
Yeah, so there's informal and there's formal. And what we know about organizations, healthy organizations really have a culture of both. A mentoring culture is a learning culture. So the first step is to make sure that you are embracing learning as a core value of your organization through your overall leadership development strategy. What we know about, although there are great informal mentoring relationships, when you have a learning culture, you'll start to have some of those, drive-by mentoring conversations that you really see both from an equity standpoint, an access standpoint, and from ability to measure the results of your investment, that having a formal mentoring initiative makes a huge difference. Having intentionality in the matching of employees, recording and measuring success, staying in contact with mentors and mentees, providing the skills and the opportunity for reflection, and then integrating it into the practices of your leaders. The best leaders are asking their people, even the most senior people in an organization, how are you investing in your own learning, and how are you investing in the learning of other people? Extra bonus points for tying that into compensation, but that's probably a matter for another time as well. So the answer is mentoring works best when it works holistically And when it has the intentionality and the structured approach so that you can have goal setting, the tracking and the measuring of success, and the intentionality in the learning. And we could go on for hours, so I'll stop there and see what that leads to in terms of questions.
Yeah, Lisa, can I piggyback a little bit? Because I think maybe to help answer this question in folks' heads too, it's to your point about intentionality. It's what's the targeted population? What's the specific goal and business intent? And I think mentoring can manifest in many different ways, right? We've spent a lot of time at NovoEd over the past year thinking, working, examining closely with our clientele about where do they want to place those bets. So it doesn't have to be just maybe more of the traditional models like, hey, focus on early careers. How do we expose new enroll to opportunities at the company in transition? It doesn't have to be just ERGs, creating a sense of connectedness and network within, or new leaders. It could start to broaden, and that could get into onboarding, like I talked about. Maybe it's a reverse mentoring, maybe it's broader around sponsorship, maybe it's targeting specific folks like frontline workers in that sort of hospitality setting. How can they be incredibly more proficient and performant in role swifter in the organization? So I think in answering, well, how does it even work? It's where do you want to apply it? I think is sort of a helpful divining rod of sorts.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the next topic here. So logically enough, we've covered a little bit of it, but what are some of the key elements of successful mentoring programs? So Lisa, before I let you go off and running, I do want to insert Andrew Bateman's question here. He says, I recently attended a speed mentoring session with kids from a local school. Following the session, I was immediately struck by how much I benefited from the experience, but wasn't sure where to apply it. What advice do you give to mentors and organizations that are implementing mentorship programs to make sure that the mentors are getting the reciprocity that, we talked about? Mentors and mentees both need to be getting something from it, as well as the organization ultimately. But how do mentors take and apply what they're learning or development is benefiting from there?
Yeah, it's a great question, Andrew, and there's many layers in which I can answer it, but let me give you kind of the overview, which is it's about intentionality. It's about the time and the preparation. We spend a lot of time when we work with mentoring pairs on with the mentors separately, talking about the importance of reflection and preparation. Thinking about their own skills, thinking about their, what it is they get out of it. I love that this struck you after you had this conversation, and how powerful would it have been to have gotten all of the mentors who were there in a room together for just a few minutes to say, what was your takeaway here and how are you going to apply it? So creating that space for preparation and for reflection is really, really important. For organizations, it really is about that capacity building and about community building, capacity and community, right? What are you doing to develop skills, the mentoring skills of the folks that you have, and how are you creating a community so that the mentoring happens not just, let's assume for a second we're talking about a one-on-one mentoring pair. There's other mentoring formations too, but the mentoring happens in peer conversations in a more informal way. You get the benefit of that informal mentoring in the context of a greater, more formal mentoring initiative. So that's my quick response. Todd, anything else that strikes you?
No, I'm just trying to think. Obviously, there's many other sort of, we think, elements, components when we think about switching into from strategy to sort of the tactics of how could I think about sort of deploying or amplifying an existing approach or initiative. So obviously, it's sort of the pieces on the matching side, the nature of what the check-ins. There's maybe some sense of centralized hub and resource component that would be tied into kind of the group check-ins that you mentioned, all the way to formal kickoffs and wrap-ups. So I think we could go real deep on program design and critical elements, but that we might need a whole nother hour plus for that one. It could be part 2 of the session.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess to sort of sum up what I heard there, it sounds like there's a successful mentoring program both needs like alignment with business strategy, like you've thought carefully about who's going to be involved at both as mentors and mentees, who's get it, like are the mentors getting the support they need to like develop and apply those skills, and then also creating space and structure for everyone to reflect, think about how they may apply things, discuss what went well, what didn't go well, those kinds of things. And then also in terms of structure, the organization having a mechanism or a system to kind of capture what's happening, how often is it happening, what's the feedback like, some way of tracking and measuring how the program itself is going, because that gets really into a question we just got about. Let's move to the next slide, Ivy, but I'll finish up here before we get to that. We did just get a question, and it's going to have to be a quick answer, I'm afraid, just because I want to make sure we get to the rest of our content here. But Kirsten Olson asked quickly, how do you measure the impact of a mentoring program in your organization? We've been struggling with this question for a while.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm going to give you a quick answer, which is there's different levels at which you measure it. You want to be measuring success in terms of the mentor and the mentee. You want to be measuring success in terms of the mentoring program itself, satisfaction with the mentoring program, and then you want to be measuring organizational outcomes. This last one is going to be much more lagging in the sense of, it's going to take a while to get there. So you want to be you want to be using the first two as a way to start getting those measurements, and then eventually measuring what the organizational outcomes are. But again, thinking about what it is you're trying to accomplish, making sure that the mentors and the mentees are both learning. So can ask some strategic questions of them about what are they reaching their goals, what are the outcomes, and then in terms of the program itself, what kind of I love it that you mentioned that hospitality model, Alan. So to what extent is the mentoring program succeeding in meeting the needs of the folks who are in the program as well? So lots of different questions you can ask, but I would encourage you to think about it on those different levels.
Can I add
Fantastic.
one thing to that, Alan? And Lisa, just I think on that organizational side, if it helps a little bit sort of on the question to get specific, some of these vehicles already exist, right? You have things like your annual employee survey. So being able to isolate folks that have gone through mentoring programs separate from others. Some of them are longer tail, to Lisa's point, thinking about succession or internal mobility. That's going to take a little bit of a sort of longer arc to sort of assessing those, but thinking upfront about some of those criticality of metrics, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because, like all of us, we're living in an AI-driven world, and one of the key factors which makes sense when you're designing a prompt or something that is going to go into the AI tool of your choice is define your success criteria up front, and that's just a helpful reminder for everything we're doing here. Is this the best way to measure? You can't measure everything, and sometimes it takes a long time to see the effect, but if you at least have the clear idea of this mentoring program is designed to impact these 5 outcomes in the business or in talent management, then you're going to have a lot easier time demonstrating the ROI, even if you can't get perfect data exactly when you need it. So on to our last topic here, expanding the reach of mentoring. And we alluded to it a couple of times at the beginning of how we are living in where most of us are coming from a background or a context where mentoring has been something that is reserved to certain segments of the workforce rather than something that's open to everybody. And there's some, decent historical reasons behind that. It's been reserved more for leadership development. Employee resource groups more recently are often using mentorship as a way to impact diversity and inclusion goals and talent mobility among certain populations of your workforce. But still, it's never, most of the time or very often, it is not thought of as something that could be started, like we were discussing, with frontline employees or first-time managers or things like that. It's just not seen as an option for their development. So I want to throw things open and talk about how things are changing and what people should be looking for in potentially expanding and democratizing the reach of mentoring programs in this way.
I'm happy to start on that
Yeah.
front. Certainly I have a vantage point when it comes to the nature of, sort of provider. I think technology can be a massive solve for this on the scalability side. So whether that's, addressing the sort of the reach of populations, inefficiencies around mentor-mentee matching, time-consuming administration, these are all challenges that folks feel. Technology, without question, can be a solve for that. It can't be the only solve, but I think it can be a powerful one. And maybe I can share a quick story. So when I was on the customer side for the first 20 years of my career, the last 8 of that were at Schneider Electric. I worked for the North American CEO, a gentleman named Laurent Berneret. We had approximately 30,000 employees in North America. He was all about this idea of learning culture and continuous skill building and development, initiated this open request for mentor-mentee matching. And of those 30,000 people, nearly 12,000 responded in terms of raising hand to say, I want this to happen. And we simply did not have the technology at the time to solve for that. And so I fast forward to where we are in sort of this moment in time, and you think you're watching other providers and vendors get into this space to say, let's address these pieces. Let's address these pieces about the sort of the matching component, about program guidance, about administrative sort of overhead, and help that be a solve, because it's such a powerful piece if we can kind of open up aperture, like we spoke about before. So a little bit of perspective that I think we as providers can be a huge solve for that, and some exciting things to share at the close of the webinar today.
Excellent. Lisa, your thoughts?
I'll do another one of these.
Perfect. So Ivy, if you move us right along here before we get to Q&A, I would love for Todd to talk us through what he was just referencing.
Yeah, so first and foremost, appreciate everyone showing up today. For folks that choose to sort of watch this on the recording side and the sort of privacy of home and comfort of couch, hopefully you recognize there's a need, there's a driving need. The data bears it out, and all that which Alan shared from their brilliant work at Brennan Hall. Lisa spent decades in this, publishing, writing, running incredibly successful practices at Center for Mentoring Excellence. We want to cascade that. We want to help enable you as individuals at these organizations. So you may be familiar with some of our open free courses that we've run of years past at NovoEd, things like Learning Experience Design or Learning Experience Impact, Learning Experience Gen AI, actively open right now. This is our next foray. So coming May 19th, free open course that we're debuting around learning experience talent. How can you, as an individual, think about solving for these problems? A lot of the questions that came in through Q&A, building out that strategic mentoring blueprint, getting in the specifics of sort of the what and the how. We're pleased and thrilled to be featuring a little bit more time with Lisa and her expertise as part of this. So we welcome everyone to come join us on this journey, and we'll create this as a reoccurring model across 2025 to equip you and enable you, and that's coming short form in May.
Excellent.
I'll put the link in the chat too for folks.
Oh, thank you, Todd. Very convenient. And also, it's going to be at the bottom. The web address is also in the bottom of the slide here, so you can copy and paste that at your leisure. Real quick, I think we do have time for one, possibly two questions. So I'm just going to go in order here. And also, I will let everybody know that I believe we're sharing the Q&A chat log with with our presenters or with our panelists after today. So if you have a question that you're really burning to ask, just put it in the Q&A log, and we'll make sure that it gets to the right place anyways. And so I wanted to ask, Cami wants to ask, can you share any overall organizational learning programs or styles that best complement a mentoring program? Essentially, like, how do you get that right blend where mentoring and other learning approaches or modalities are working really well in Congress with each other?
Yeah. So, mentoring programs can succeed in the absence of a mentoring culture. It's a lot harder. When you have a we've seen it, but it becomes a fizzle or an other thing. The overall learning style is to have a mentoring culture, which is, as I said before, it is a learning culture. It is a culture where the leaders are talking about the importance of investing in your own learning and in the learning of others. It's a culture where leaders are held accountable for that. It's a culture that teaches about cultural competency and empathy and practices those things. Where there is a psychological safety, which is the embracing of failure and learning from failure forward. So that is not the most tactical answer that you can get your arms around, but I think in the time we have, it's probably the best one that I can give you that gives you a sense of what needs to be present in order to have a full, flourishing mentoring culture. Todd, anything else that you would add there?
No, I'll give my opportunity for the thumbs up.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, everybody who was able to join today. Thank you for the great questions. And now it's time for Ivy to tell us who won the raffle.
All right. Thanks, Alan, Lisa, and Todd. I'm excited to announce the winner of today's raffle, winning a free Excellence in Action program submission, is Cheryl Moy. Congratulations, Cheryl. We will be reaching out with more information shortly.
Thanks for joining, Cheryl. Congratulations.
Alan, you might have caught you on mute just a second there.
Thanks once again for everybody for joining us. Thank you for the wonderful folks at NovoEd, Todd, Lisa. It's been a true pleasure. Everybody, a reminder, you'll get a PDF of the presentation and a link to the recording within 24 hours. If you want to sign up for anything else like this, or if you liked this and want to watch more stuff like this, just click on that link, brandonhall.com/webinars, and you'll get to see everything we've got in the hopper for the next couple of weeks/months. Thanks, everybody.